Welcome to KLIM.News. I'm Kristi Leigh. Today we have on Dr. Ron Paul. He's an American author, activist, physician, retired politician. He served here in Texas as a U.S. representative, also ran for president in 1988, 2008, and 2012. And he keeps up with his political commentary now on his show, the Ron Paul Liberty Report. Welcome in, Dr. Ron Paul. It's an honor to have you here.
Kristi, nice to be with you.
Now, I understand that you're a constitutionalist, so I wanted to dive right in and ask you about the state of what's happening right now. We have social media censorship all over the place. We have mandated vaccines now. There's so much that is threatening freedom and our foundation, the foundational values that we believe in. So have you, in your long political history, ever seen such an attack on that?
No, not offhand. I guess there's been time throughout our history it's been pretty bad when you think of some of our presidents during wartime, you know, like Woodrow Wilson, and when you think of FDR. So there's a lot of abuse, and we still have a good Constitution. I've always considered it imperfect, but even the founders didn't consider it being perfect because it would always be vulnerable to the imperfection of man who wants to be the politician. So this Constitution is sitting there, but our crisis comes because we don't have people who have respect for it. They don't have an understanding of it, and they manipulate it for their own gain. And that's where our big problem is. So it isn't so much that we don't have a Constitution anymore, but we have a group of people who don't care a whole lot about the Constitution.
Now, you have your show, the Ron Paul Liberty Report. Have you faced censorship yet on any of your platforms?
Yeah, I think Facebook messed around with us, and I always hope that stuff's going away, so I have other people to worry about that. But I think we were locked out for a week or something like that. But the big thing is even though I'd like to ignore all that, I'm aware of it because we keep thinking and kidding with each other on the staff and say, you think we're allowed to say this? You know, sort of ridiculing the whole thing. But no, I would say that it's still serving our interests. We do get our information on this with a lot of frustration because I don't think there's any doubt from my inexpertise that the numbers are manipulated as far as how many people are reached. I don't think where at one time we thought they would spread our message if it deserved to be spread. But right now, I don't think that happens. And so I don't think the numbers actually measures the number of people who would like to hear the message.
Right. Now, you made history, it's my understanding, as having a son that followed in your footsteps and both serving in the legislation at the same time. I wanted to know if you could take us behind the curtain and tell me if you talk politics a lot with your son, Senator Rand Paul, and on that note, has there been any discussion of his squaring off with Dr. Fauci?
You know, basically not. One time I mentioned that on a TV program, and they interpreted it as, oh, it sounds like he doesn't even talk to his son. Maybe we should try to help them get together, because I would defer and say, yeah, they want to know the relationship. It's similar to what you're asking. And when he comes to our house, which is infrequent, he's busy. He's up in Kentucky and Washington. But we don't get on the phone in the morning, and he doesn't ask me questions about the Federal Reserve. It's at a point where he knows where I stand, I know where he stands, and amazingly, they're very close together, you know. And so we don't. But if he's here, we'll get into discussions of things. Or if I don't, where he's helpful, if I really want to know what's going on, is sort of the strategy. Where when will this come up in the Senate, and who did this? It's not so much the philosophy. He's well groomed in it, and he's been reading books for a long time. He's always been interested in political organization. I consider him much better at political organization than myself because he volunteered, and I never put pressure on my kids. We have 5 to say, "Oh, I need you here. I want you out here. You got to campaign for me." Matter of fact, I went in the opposite direction. I'd sort of ignore the whole thing, but they all did. But Rand especially would get involved. And he would do precinct work and understand that he literally took breaks from his education both in college and medical school, in order to get involved in my campaign. And that didn't make me excited because, I thought his education was very, very important. But no, we don't get into any deep discussions over whether or not we're going to have to raise taxes or lower taxes, let me tell you.
Now, I know many are proud of his stance in standing up to Dr. Fauci. And in light of the gain of function research, allegations of perjury now, it seems that he lied about that. And then just as early as last evening, an article from The Telegraph, I don't know if you've seen this yet, but it says that leaked papers are revealing that Wuhan scientists planned to release coronavirus particles into cave bats. And the documents are confirmed genuine by a former member of the Trump administration. And even though they had asked for funding from DARPA, there's a professor of oncology at St. George's University of London who said the research may have gone ahead even without that funding. We're just continuing to get more and more confirmation that this was in some way out of Wuhan. And so in light of this Telegraph article, I don't know if you'd had a chance to see it, what should be done about Dr. Fauci and all these revelations that are coming forward?
Yeah, fire him. That's what should happen. The Republicans kept him, the Democrats keep him, and that's sort of sad. You could say, well, why don't we follow up on a couple of Rand's suggestions, and pursue it, investigate, and find out what's going on. But the judicial system, the FBI, and it's so messed up and there's so much lying going on. The problem is everybody lying, and so even the people who are supposed to be our policemen are exactly the opposite. They're culprits, and they do things that is the opposite of trying to get the truth. So the best we can do is exactly what's being done. A little bit here, a little bit there. I keep thinking, people ask me, why do I mess around with this stuff? Nobody cares. They're not going to listen to you. They're not going to rein in the Fed. And I said, yeah, but it has to be said, and then we have to make a record of it. And maybe people will wake up someday, especially when there's a financial crisis and there's a financial bubble crash, bursting of the dollar bubble. This is something that people might have to respond to. In the meantime, though, it's going to go on. And so I fall back with that type of frustration I have. I want everybody to do whatever they can, but I don't think they should overly expect that we're going to get confirmation. So when we do get confirmation now on whether it's the Wuhan virus or whatever it is, and we're getting a few of those, I think that is great. And yeah, we still shouldn't be, wow, I never dreamed this could happen. We should say, boy, that's good. Let's keep moving in that direction, because that's what it's all about. But someday there are some things, take for instance, assassinations in this country, whether it's Jack Kennedy or Robert Kennedy or Martin Luther King, they interest me because there's always an explanation. There's always a commission. And there's always a cover-up. And every time something bad happens, we'll have a commission and study it. 9/11, have a commission. And then it just goes on because they're pretending they're trying to get to the truth and the people want the truth. But these commissions are set up to cover up and take away the blame from the people who really messed up. So I think we should encourage that. I just don't think that that's going to be the answer. Actually, I emphasize a lot more the education of people on property rights and civil liberties, why they should pay more attention to the Constitution, and maybe they'd pay attention to not going to war unless there's a war declaration, and trying to instill this, because that takes a whole generation to have a change. And it's also the reason why I have a homeschooling program, which is growing by leaps and bounds, because finally it's breaking out. Truth is breaking out. And it's not because our government decided to tell us, well, you know what, our government schools are coming up short. They're not doing a very good job. So they're doing so badly. The economy will do badly. There's finally going to be looking for an answer, and that's why studying Austrian economics and studying civil liberties and trying to understand the purpose and the goals of the Constitution. I see that as important because we're losing because we lost the influence of our views in the university system, and that's been going on for 100 years. The progressives, that's where they went. They didn't go and say, well, we're going to elect somebody to Congress. But the results of what they did are getting the Marxists elected to Congress. And that's the result, because when I was in Congress, nobody would dare talk about Marxism and socialism. That way, they were so bad. And they would whisper in my ear and say, you know, Ron, we're with you on this one. We're libertarians on this particular issue. But nobody said that they were socialists on this issue. So I think things will change. I have a lot of respect for the Mises Institute because they've done a very great job in educating a lot of young people and a lot of professors coming out of there teaching the right thing.
But then again, you've mentioned infiltration of our universities, you've mentioned collusion, corruption within our government agencies, and we're seeing firsthand medical tyranny with basically no resistance. It's all so very brazen that it's very hard to have hope of where to go from here. So in light of all that, where do we go from here?
Well, you look around, you have to search for the hope. Yesterday, I think it was yesterday or the day before, we had two videos. One was there was finally the breaking out of a little bit of common sense in Australia. They had thousands of people, you know, fed up with it all, and they closed down a highway. And also, there was a pretty good demonstration in New York City. So that's what we have to encourage. They have to be recognized because the government of people is always supported by the people. Now, no matter how bad it is, they've tolerated it too long and they've allowed it to happen. Even the Soviet system, it was tolerated because of how it was developed and things were bad and this was going to answer the problems that they had. So they eventually were able to overcome it. But what happened to it? It failed. And I think the most wonderful day in the 20th century, at least so far, and it has its shortcoming, was the coming down of the Berlin Wall. That's the crashing down, visible evidence that their philosophy is wrong. How many people are right now, even the socialists, aren't saying, you know, folks, vote for me for Congress because I want America to look like Venezuela. We don't have enough people saying, if you don't get this straightened out, we're going to look like Venezuela. So I think it's an educational issue, and it's a little more tedious, a little bit more frustrating. A lot of people ask me, Ron, why you've been up there a bunch of years, your bills don't get passed. You know, don't you get really frustrated listening to those people? Not really. I know what to expect, and I says, and I have real low expectations. So I don't think I'm going to change the world, but I do know how the world changes, and it's changed philosophically. How did our country come to being? There were some great people in that era that knew and understood hundreds of years of history. You know, we didn't invent the concept of personal liberty, but we brought it together like nobody else ever did. But it was a concept whose idea had come, and it was put into a constitution. But it was not too long after that. There were a lot of loopholes, and they're continuing. So we have to have, you know, the restoration of a revolutionary idea and getting people to say, yes, we want to free up the people so that they can go to a ball game without putting on a mask. Why do we put masks on these little kids? Wake up, folks. This is terrible. And you're doing a lot more damage than helping. Things that we're doing in COVID are really very, very dangerous and very harmful and very expensive. And more people, at least we get, I guess we get the good messages from people who say, yes, go, go, go.
Yeah.
But I'm realistic. I know how big the problem.
Yeah, it sounds like your answer is education, but also more civil disobedience and speaking out and trying to get the word out. And you also mentioned people coming together, which is something else I wanted to touch upon with you. I've noticed that there's some unlikely bedfellows, if you will. There is Glenn Beck recently had on Brett Weinstein, and then we've seen Glenn Greenwald on Tucker Carlson. So you're seeing all of the sudden some traditional liberals joining forces with conservatives to stand up against the tyranny. Do you think we're going to see more of that, and is that a step in the right direction?
Let's hope so, because that's something I've been very interested in. You know, after the Cold War ended, it was thought, well, the West won and freedom won, and that's what would happen. But that wasn't the case. Even though I was excited about it, the replacement for vicious communism was, you know, interventionism, which is cronyism, you know, corporate cronyism, and which means that if you continue with that type of a policy, where the corporations become blended into the state, you end up with fascism. So that's, you know, a great threat that we have right now. We're moving in that direction, but that just means we have to work harder in pointing out the fallacy, and we have to have something to replace it. We can't just condemn it. We have to say, well, how does it work? How does this silly notion that Ron Paul has about freedom, even in medicine, you know, that medicine should be delivered in the marketplace? Well, I'll tell you what, medicine is deteriorating, and now the medical leaders, so-called leaders, over the last 100 years have joined in the government, and they control just about everything, the regulations, the prices, the research, and everything else. And we end up with Dr. Fauci as our medical leader of the whole country. But that will come to an end, because they have a failed system. That's why I don't get too uncomfortable, because I am so convinced that the issue of personal liberty and property rights and voluntarism and contract, this is so superior that if we can't win this argument, there's something wrong with us. They're aggressive and they use force and they endorse force. And of course, our side does not endorse the use of force, makes it more difficult. But I tell you what, if you still have any way you can get information out, and we still have that, as bad as it is with the internet right now, I mean, we depend on the internet. We get our programs out there. I think the numbers are all controlled, and they don't want to give us too much credit. But we do reach a lot of people, and I think the internet is very helpful. And I've been optimistic about the technology, even though I don't understand it. I said, you know, free up the society. And if you're unhappy with the social media, there will be a replacement. Somebody's going to come in, and every once in a while I read these stories, people trying and working on doing the same thing, and they may well self-destruct, which I think is possible, because there's going to be a lot of destruction done once the big bubble bursts.
As a physician, I was interested in asking you about that. What is happening with all of these doctors? I mean, outright refusals for hospitals to even give early treatment when it is prescribed by a doctor. It seems like there's disagreements between doctors, and some doctors are just ostracized if they don't follow the narrative. What is happening? Are they just all bought and paid for?
Well, the welfare state encourages wimpism. They become wimps. And, you know, they might have been idealistic at one time, but the government took over 80% control of education, medical delivery, cost of medicine, insurance. So they're there. And I made a statement that I think people have the government that they tolerate and they get support. And for a long time, the AMA ruled the day, and they got the support of the doctors. Right now, you know, there's a big contest. I don't know what the percentages are, but there are still a lot of good doctors out there fighting it. They're just not on national TV. But you can find it. You know, Fox will put on some doctors out there that are speaking very clearly about how bad this system is. And just for practical reasons, people are looking you know, for a different form of medicine. And I think that's very good. And I don't have to decide if I believe that. I don't have to tell you or anybody else what would it be like and how do you do it and how do you run it. You just legalize freedom. Just legalize it and never punish people. But now people and the doctors, they get punished. And nurses, I feel for. I mean,
It's
you know, I say,
scary.
why don't you stand up for this? Because they might be a single mother and has 3 kids at home, and it's their only income they have. And if they say boo, out the door. The big thing is it'll end when people wake up to this atrocious type of policy. But at the same thing, you might be thinking, where am I going to get enough food for my kids under the circumstances that we have? This whole idea that some of the nurses went to work as soon as the virus broke out and pandemic started, that they've been working there. They didn't take those shots. They didn't believe in them, and now they've had all this experience. And because they've worked with these patients, they probably have the best immunity in the country, better than any vaccine can give them. And yet they get fired, and then they come up and people who are sick now, oh, the hospital's full. We don't have any more beds. And they don't have any more nurses.
And they don't address the issue of staffing, which is very much an issue, and they don't seem to care when they lose people. I know my time is ending with you, so I wanted to bring this up. I feel like we really need a hero. We really need someone to come out that we can all rally behind. And I know that for my generation, I feel like you were a trailblazer. You had a lot of support, wildly popular in my generation. But even in that system, I feel like you were cornered out. And as it's similarly on the other side, Bernie Sanders seemed to have been cornered out by the establishment. So even if we do get a hero, what hope is there that this person can have a viable run?
Yeah, and it is important. People do like personalities, and that works. But I think the emphasis has to be, more philosophic. Like it's authoritarianism versus libertarianism, and there's a contest there. Who's going to win out? Who describes it the best? Who's going to be able to present their case? And one reason why I have this, and people sort of rib me a little bit about being too optimistic. I said, when there's a problem, it proves they're wrong, and it's going to get worse. And the monetary system is going to collapse. Why can't we see this as an opportunity? So I work on monetary reform and what we should do. That's why I wanted an audit of the Fed to find out how they really rip people off. And you can't have fiat money. That doesn't follow it. And big government is bad. The evidence is overwhelming. And finally, hopefully, we will plant enough seeds that people say, what we've been doing now for 100 years and listening to all those authoritarians and so-called progressives, it's not worthwhile. So what we want to do is try something not new. The principles of liberty have been around for thousands of years, bits and pieces, but they've been built on. I think there was a tremendous burst of understanding with our Constitution, but we still have our ups and downs, but I still see seeds being planted. So I always saw my role as not being some hero or something like that. My goal was just leaving a record. Because I never expected to go to Congress. I told my wife when she was worried about me winning, I said, if I'm not going to win, they're not going to vote against somebody that wants to get rid of Santa Claus. And so I ended up being there sort of on a fluke. But my goal was to do what I thought people should do and just expect to not have to be able to stay. They'll probably kick me out the first month. And that is to set a record on what it would be like. I would always vote for the Constitution, and most of the time that was enough. But if it became another issue, I would bring in morality. Morality and law are so frequently can be combined. You can talk about morality. You shouldn't kill and steal. So maybe if you follow that, but that's also a constitutional principle too, and those are the rules. So emphasizing those rules and leaving a record, I was hoping maybe someday somebody would pick it up and say, I wonder what this guy was like, because every once in a while I'll pick up some speeches made by a congressman maybe 75 years ago. And I am so impressed that he left a record. And back then, and even today, people don't know that individual and they don't care. So I'm not much sense in me worrying about that. So this is the reason I think my advice is know and understand and make yourself available and find friends and promote this cause because it can be a lot of fun and you ought to enjoy it because it's so serious.
It is very, very serious. And maybe we should start with what we began with. Fire Fauci and make sure that something is followed through with criminal prosecution. We need
Right.
law and order back. Well, thank you so much for giving us your time. I hope we can do it again and catch up, and hopefully we'll have more positive news next time.
Okay, very good, Kristi. Nice to be with you.
Thank you.